big chap gets a bit small. Here's your look at the Mezco 1/12 Collective Alien Xenomorph. The 1/12 Collective Alien features an all-new seamless body design with an internal skeleton armature that's durable yet highly posable. The hostile xenomorph is equipped with a hinged pharyngeal jaw and interchangeable inner mouths, as well as an interchangeable chest plate pierced by the ASSO 400 harpoon grappling gun, as seen in the final scene of the movie. Well, so it would seem that even in 1/12, no one will hear you scream. Before we get a closer look at the 1979 Alien Xenomorph 1/12 Collective figure from the folks over at Mezco, let's grab the tape measure first just to see how tall the figure stands. Now, there are issues that I have with this figure, and I'm going to do my best to cover off all the things I really don't like about him, but I'm also going to try to be positive about the figure as well. The figure, though, in the meantime, stands about 7 inches in height, or the 1/12 Collective Alien is about 17.5 centimeters tall. First, for those curious as to how tall the alien is next to the previously looked at 1/12 Collective Predator, let's do that. Let's slide the figure over here and quickly then bring in the Predator figure that we've already had a look at. You know, again, I did say in that review that I think the price point of these figures are way too expensive. At a Predator sitting at $100, $120, $130, depending on where you decide to pick your 1/12 Collective figures from, it's really hard to then look at a Predator like this, as good as he is, and still not think that he's too expensive when you compare to what NECA is doing. Now, I know there are people that are fans of the 1/12 Collective figures. I don't mean to step on anybody's toes by then saying that. But it's a little harder when you have figures that don't have, like, suits, something over top of an existing plastic body. Yet, ironically, we're essentially getting that now with the Xenomorph big chap here. And good or bad, it is definitely worth, I would say, at least the price that they're charging for it. Whether the additional things that they've added to it over top of what we would normally have gotten with a NECA figure is justified, again, we'll talk more about that in this review. So, getting the review underway, the first thing we'll have a look at that comes included with the Alien is a display stand that happens to be not only the same shape, but also the same color as the one that we looked at with the Predator. One thing they have done, at least to the credit of the Alien, is they've printed the font in such a way that when you do put the figure down, you'll know right away what movie it's on, instead of actually looking at it on an angle. Check out my review of the Predator, know exactly what I'm talking about. There's two ways of actually displaying the figure on the stand, one of which uses the peg that's actually in between the A and the L. So we can go ahead and take your figure, for example, and the bottoms of the Predator's or the Alien's feet. Just use those then provided holes, and you plug the figure onto the display stand. Now, why I did make the mention of the Predator display stand is that the Predator logo, I guess this is really about the same, but I guess you can technically turn this. So yeah, exactly what I mean here. You can see, like, the Alien, for example, is facing the right way. When we look at this, even though we already know the character and what movie it's pulled from, we know at least from the display stand it's going to help us a little bit, that we don't have to look on an angle to read exactly what movie it's supposed to be from. The other way of displaying the figure, though, involves me having to remove it from the display stand. Just put the figure down here, for example. You know, for funny enough, for an Alien figure, I keep wanting to now say Predator, for an Alien figure, normally would be an issue to stand with other figure companies doing it. Big Chap stands pretty good, all things considered. Like I said, though, the other way of displaying the figure involves using the adjustable neck here. It's adjusted in four knuckle joints, one at the bottom, one about midway through, about 3/4 of the way through, and then one on the end that moves back and forth. The joints on this are pretty tight, so just be careful. You may even have to loosen this up a little bit. Not loosen it too much, though, because the more time you actually have the figures committed to using these display stands, the more, in fact, you'll do the opposite. You'll go back with a screwdriver to tighten up the screws, because, again, like, this will start to get loose really fast. This goes on to the display stand. The easiest way to do this is actually just take the bottom of the peg, pop it through the hole in the opposite way. So you're going to push it out so that the peg essentially pops out the bottom. This was a lot easier than when we did it with the Predator. And then just go ahead and remove it. Now pop it in the top. And now you got yourself an adjustable neck display stand. The neck, or the waist clip, clips then around the big chap body. And again, not that this is going to be, I just want to fully stress this is not the way I'm going to be displaying the figure. It at least does show you that if you want to have him in more of a dynamic pose, you can also pull that off. We're going to detach that for right now, put that to the side. And the other thing I did want to look at here is also the little accessory baggie. The baggie does hold all the things that we're about to have a look at in this review. Extra hands, the extra little mouthpieces inside. It also can hold like the face huggers and stuff like that as well. There's a section, as always, that you can write down below exactly the character, the figure that the accessories are for. So again, you can kind of store these away without having to rely on the box to go back to every single time. On to the rest of the accessories now. The figure comes included with 2 ovomorph or alien eggs. The 2 variations actually are one that's opened and one that's completely sealed and contained. These feel generally quite heavy, like salt and pepper shakers, although you would not want to be shaking and seasoning any of the things that you're about to eat. One is obviously, as you can see, open, so that's going to be holding and storing inside the face hugger. The other one, again, is completely closed. There's no way to open the flap. Like I said, it's just a molded, solid piece of plastic. And actually, again, they feel like rocks, really, when you're looking at them. I would imagine a lot of the budget of the plastic went actually into producing the ovomorph or alien eggs. Figure also comes included with a couple of face huggers. One, the more traditional looking face hugger. This just has, again, like the extended out legs, long tail that jets out behind it. The tail does not appear to be a wire frame, so you wouldn't be able to bend this. I suppose, if anything, you probably could submerge this in hot water just to soften up the plastic tail, just to be able to bring this in a little bit more so. But again, it's a nicely detailed looking face hugger. And again, they're in the underside right there. The additional pink and red that they've used does look quite good on the underside of the face huggers. I don't want to say necessarily its face, but its body. There really isn't, again, a way to store this inside the open egg. I mean, again, if you're going to be putting it in there, ultimately what's just going to end up happening is the tail's going to be hanging out the end. So I guess you probably could have it look like it's just emerged, or you can have it kind of not necessarily hanging down like this, but again, probably the best way I would imagine is just to kind of have it hanging like this. Or again, you probably could attach it onto some poor victim's face. Speaking of which, how's that for a segue? Speaking of which, there is also a latched-on version of the face hugger. Kind of doesn't serve much of a purpose right now, but I guess for right now we have ourselves a predator. You could technically just pop the head off. You know, let's see if we can actually do this. Just remove the plasma caster. Go ahead and remove the head. And well, there really isn't enough ball joint to work with. This really would work much better with a smaller head sculpt. But again, we're just going to pop this back into place. And then again, for all intents and purposes, the face hugger would then stretch across the human face, or whatever other 1/12 collective figures that you have in your collection right now. Maybe the Predator really wasn't the best one to work with right now. So we'll just put him back to the side. I got to put his head back on in a moment. The figure also comes included with, of course, the chest burster. And get a good look at that. I always kind of like the design of a chest burster. I mean, you don't get much chance to see it really in the movie. The thing scurries off before anyone can really kind of hone in on what's going on. It sort of does peek itself out, says hello to everybody before it scurries away from the lunchroom table. It's got some nice coloring, so you can see it's already left someone's body. It's got some nice blood all over it. Very, very cool looking. Pretty well to stand on its own. I mean, again, like it's so small of an accessory. If you're not too careful, you're likely to lose it. Or again, you can always go back to a little baggie from the 1/12 collective figures. You can put it in there, of course, when you're not going to be using it. The figure also comes included with some swappable hands. These ones are the more shocking. I'm sneaking up behind you and scaring you when you don't know I'm behind you, the kind of hands. Or again, these are kind of the hands that would look like if it's like being jettisoned from the escape pod, for example, which we'll talk more about in a moment because it does also come included with a chest piece part that has the ASSO 400 harpoon gun. Well, not really the whole hook, but at the very least, the cable, the cable that comes from the hook. So it comes with a couple of those hands, and then there's some slightly relaxed hands, because if you really compare it with the hands that are currently in the sockets, they're kind of not more gripping hands, but you can see like the hands are a little bit more closer to the thumb, whereas these ones are a little bit more relaxed. Changing out the hands, by the way, so let's say, for example, we want to go with these scaring hands. Just go ahead and remove this from the peg, and then we're going to go ahead and take the appropriate hand and just pop that onto the ball joint. And he's got these hands. I don't think there's necessarily a placement where one thumb, I mean, that could be a thumb, that could be a thumb. I think you probably could have the hands on either side. It's not one left, one right, for example. The figure also comes included with variations of the inside jaw. I'm just going to kind of move everything out of the way to kind of clear up the shop here before we kind of look at the things. Comes with a smaller variation of it, as you can see, has the chompers more close together. There is one version that has a longer extension that has, of course, it looking like it wants to mow down on somebody's face. Then there's one that I think is my favorite of the three. This one actually does have a slime on the end of it. It actually kind of looks like it's got android blood on the end of it. Has Ash gotten too close to the Xenomorph? But this one I do really like quite a lot. The little bit, again, additional slime. Probably could have maybe made that a little bit more of a greener color. But overall, again, I just love the idea that they would have included that. To change, I guess we can't really technically say change because we haven't even put the first one in. We just want to open up the mouth. And like most of the cases when you get a Xenomorph, there's like a little hole on the inside of the mouth that you can then take the jaw and just slide into place. It slides a lot further in than you expect it would do. And then just to take and show you guys what the slime one looks like. Slide into place. Yeah, I gotta really like that. Gotta really like that. That looks super, super cool. You know, while we're certainly on the topic of things slime coming off from its tiny little jaw or tiny little mouth inside, I kind of wish that they could have followed suit and added some of that as maybe a clip-on part that had clipped onto the bottom jaw of the alien. Just somewhat similar to what we get here. Just if they added like a little clip piece, like a little chin guard, so to speak, of slime that could clip onto the bottom of the Xenomorph's mouth. The last thing that he comes included with, I'm just going to again move the salt and pepper shakers out of the way, don't season your omelets, whatever you do with it, is that you also get this chest piece. Now I'm going to be honest about this. I think this is a waste of plastic. I don't think you could accomplish, first of all, I think the same thing by putting a hole right here and then giving you the actual harpoon gun cable. The grapple hook could have just attached to the inside of that without actually wasting, I feel, plastic to give you a completely different chest plate. Actually, it's supposed to go like that. To do this, all you're going to have to do is just kind of, if you look to the side, you can kind of see between the sides, between the two halves, there's like a little line right there. You can kind of actually even feel it with your fingers. Just kind of get in there with your finger and your thumb and just do your best just to kind of wiggle it back and forth. It attaches by 3 pegs. There we go. And there's the 3 pegs, by the way, and just remove that. And then this literally just takes the place. It's like somebody just tagged you in. I don't think it's necessary. I mean, like, look at that. It looks, first of all, like it's a worm sticking out of the figure's body. It doesn't actually look at all like the harpoon gun. But again, if you wanted to mimic the scene of this thing being jettisoned into space, I guess you could pull off that effect and, of course, make use of the display stand neck. It's there, after all. But again, I just don't think that this was necessary for the plastic. If a budget had to be allocated to this figure, and it clearly looks like they spent a lot more on this figure than what maybe they did with the Predator, I don't think I would have used the budget to make this extra chest plate when it literally, I mean, it's not a damaged part at all. It's just the same chest, but it just happens to have a line sticking out of it. Again, it looks like a leech, a worm, or something along those lines. But again, we're just going to attach that, and for the sake of the articulation of the figure, I got to move that out of the way because my fingers are going to get all over that. Anyways, we're just going to plug that back into place. Other than the unnecessary bit of plastic that was used for that, we can finally get a closer look at the Xenomorph. Now, here's where my problem is. In the earlier review, when we had a look at the Predator figure, my whole talking point was the fact that it's essentially a plastic body. Yes, it's got real webbing on it, the netting that he has over top of his body. Yes, he does have light-up features, not only in the plasma caster shoulder-mounted cannon, but it also does have it on the laser scope. So there's some mileage to be made for that. That we have gotten Predator figures from NECA also as well that have light-up functions. So really, it's hard to then look at a figure that's 3 times the amount and not say, well, Mezco did it better. And again, like, the debate is still going for that video. With this figure, the opposite ended up happening. They went extra by adding a rubber skin over top of all of its limbs. Everywhere on this figure, essentially except for the head and the chest, is encased inside like a rubber skin suit. And what's rather interesting about this is I just put the figure down here for a second. I want to bring in the instruction guide just to show you. The instruction guide only just covers off all the things I've already looked at. So like the swapped out chest plate, the different mandible teeth on the inside, little chompers. But then down below here, a very long things that you can't do. In order to avoid damage to the body of this figure, it is recommended that you do not excessively bend any parts of the body. Bummer. The range of motion on most parts is between 60 and 90 degrees. Do not place the figure in areas of high temperature and humidity, which may be a deal breaker for some that live in humid conditions. Do not leave exposed directly to sunlight. Are we talking about gremlins? for extended periods of time. Do not touch the figure with sharp objects. Rub with any kinds of solvents, which I guess makes sense, and apply direct heat of any kind. Excessive manipulation of the figure may cause deterioration finish to be dulled. All of that, and then again, you get yourself a figure that's again like what 120? Like, I picked this one up over on Entertainment Earth's website. I think I may have paid about $100, maybe it was just about $110 for this guy. So essentially what that basically breaks down, if I can just give you the basics on that, is that you can't really touch this figure. You can touch the skin, but don't excessively touch it because you're going to dull the surface. Don't leave it and don't move the parts too excessively either, because you're probably going to start to develop splits in the skin. Like overall, I think while they have added fairly enough extra things to sort of warrant, I feel, the price point that they add onto this figure, they're essentially adding things onto the figure that eventually is going to give you problems. That being said, let's get a closer look at the head sculpt here. Head sculpt is good. I got no complaints at all with the head here of the big chap. You do have, once again, the frosted dome here, so you can still see the skeletal inside, but it's fairly diluted, so it's really kind of hard. I mean, close enough in, you can obviously inspect all the finer features that Mezco sculpted into this. Further away, of course, it's going to be looking more like a frosted dome. And I got to say, like, the coloring that they used for the dome looks quite good. You've got some nice additional browns that they've added in there, mostly an all black body. You've got, again, the silver there on the tops and the bottoms of the teeth. Don't get too close. Don't get too close. I'm telling you, don't get too close. That's nicely painted also as well. You got the little tubes, of course, that run from the front of the chin area to the back of the body, where, of course, you have all these additional tubes, the parts that jettison themselves out from the back of the figure's body. They're all plastic here. And in fact, again, like the rib cage part is plastic, but like everything else on this figure, short of the hands, short of the feet, even the tail is also encased in this rubber plastic. Again, while it does look good, it gives you a very seamless looking designed body. The longevity is the thing, of course, that the biggest the big flag for me right now is because while I have this figure on display, I don't live necessarily in a humid condition climate. But I got to imagine, like, am I always going to want to have, for example, the figure's arms straight? Because if I leave them permanently bent like this for a long period of time, will it start to develop splitting in that plastic? The plastic feels pretty durable. I mean, like, you can see the way I'm pulling it with my fingers. It's pretty stretchy, rubbery plastic. But that's only because I've had the figure out of the box for about 3 hours or so. I haven't had this guy on display. I have to now be a worry, of course, where I'm going to be putting this guy. I can't put him necessarily in my office where I'm going to have a sunlight coming in on a regular basis, because that's going to start to dry out the plastic. And eventually it's going to cause the culprit of this being splitting on me. There's always going to be things I'm going to have to now worry about on this figure. Cosmetically, he looks good. But problem-wise, just the way they constructed this figure and why they've made the choices of using the softer plastic, again, it does put them in that category space of what you would expect then with a Hot Toys. Higher-end figure gives you higher-end materials that they use, but I think it's really the wrong choice that they would have gone with. For the figure's articulation, the head is going to be on a ball joint, so yeah, it does rotate back and forth. You're just going to, though, want to be careful of those tubes. You pull it too far one way, and you can kind of feel like this tube right here is already starting to stretch, so you don't want to have it too far. It does look up pretty good, though, and it does look down decently, I would say. The mouth does open and close. Yum, 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 yum. Like the arms. Okay, so like the arms are on ball joints here, so you're really not going to have to deal with the rubber material affecting the joint in the shoulders. That's not a problem. So if you want to stick them up, you can do that with the alien. The problem, though, then comes, and again, like you can rotate the arms back and forth as well. But here's where all the problems start to happen, is with the elbow joints. You're probably going to be bending an elbow, I would imagine, for the 112 Collective big chap. But I mean, even just the time that I've done this, not that it's left behind any marks, but I feel like, again, if I'm going to be displaying this figure, I may have to just put him, like I've done with Hot Toys figures, I may have to put the alien figure in like a museum pose and not do anything to it, not touch it, not move it, not pose it. You can pose it if you want to, but again, the longer you pose it and the conditions that you have the figure posed in may result in some damage being done to the skin that they've used. Either way, like the hands do bend, or I should say the arms, elbows do bend. The hands do rotate all the way around. You can hinge them also back and forth. Upper torso is on a ball joint. But again, like when you're rotating the top of the torso, they've left enough space, at least, from between the rib cage and like then the underbody suit. But again, like moving this back and forth, is that going to start to rub against this and start wearing away the material? I don't know. Does look down just only by a little bit, looks up, and then again, you can rock it back and forth. Again, here's another problem area, the legs. So you're obviously not going to want to split the legs too far because, of course, splitting the legs will cause a split up the middle, and you don't certainly want that to happen. The legs move forward and move back. There's I suppose you could say a mild swivel in the leg, but again, like just look at the material that they've used here. Beating a dead horse, maybe I am, I don't know. Double hinge or maybe a single hinge, though, only on the knee. And again, if anything really broke underneath this, it'd be impossible to get in there to try to fix a joint. Once it's broken, you're only going to be breaking your heart by the fact you've got now yourself a broken-limbed xenomorph. Then he has articulation here in the ankles, where again, you can rock it back and forth, you can rock it up and down. But again, like because they've used this not silicone, but it's kind of like a silicone material because they've used this rubber overlaid skin. There's obviously a point where it gets to the foot, and the foot's plastic, and this part's that rubber material. So it sort of does look like he's wearing really tight pants. And then you've got some additional articulation here for the tail, so you can move it out. Again, you can do all the things that normally a wireframe tail would permit you. But again, like, I don't know. Where do we wrap things up on this review? You know, the one thing I would have said about the problems with the Predator are now not the case necessarily here with the Alien. Xenomorph here from Mezco and the 112 Collective, I think have added enough stuff to it where you feel like you're getting a higher end figure. Sort of the trade-off in that and the sacrifice in that is the material that they decided to use. This might have just been a case where it was more beneficial to the figure and beneficial to you as a collector and not having stress down the road if they had just simply molded this guy in an articulated body and left the rubber suit off completely. It does look good from a seamless standpoint, but it's going to cause you stress down the road, I feel, if you again, are just bending. I mean, we looked at the instructions. If you're just bending the elbows, bending the knees, is that just going to be enough on its own to cause split in this rubber skin that they've used? I don't think it was a good choice on Mezco's part. While I still do think that swappable chest piece part that Mezco included with the Xenomorph is just a waste of plastic. Could they not have just accomplished the exact same look by having just a smaller piece plug into the front of the chest? You didn't have to necessarily have a hole, but maybe just a front area of the chest could have just attached to make a hole, and then you would just run the cable line in there from the grapple hook. Did we have to waste an entire molding of literally the same chest piece in order to accomplish this look? Speaking of accomplishing this look, this is also one thing that helps if you want to display him looking like this by using the adjustable neck that comes included with all the 112 Collective figures. Didn't use it when we actually had a look at the final looks of the Predator, but I did definitely want to fix that, at least here with the review of the Xenomorph, and at least say that I gave it the college try. Now, given it the college try, while we're certainly still on the topic of that, you know, to Mezco's credit, I will say at least they tried to think of some creative ways to make what normally could be a $35 figure feel like a figure that could be $100 plus. And for anybody that is collecting the 112 Collective figures, again, I don't mean at all to step on any of your toes. I know a lot of you did like the 112 Collective Predators and didn't think it was necessarily fair that we were always comparing it to the NECA figures. NECA's a little easier when I think it comes to the Predator figures because, again, you have an all-plastic articulated figure body. Mezco did it a little bit better, I will say at least, because it did have the netting over top of its body and did have light-up functions. Xenomorph, though, is a completely different thing altogether. Xenomorph, I think, does show that Mezco wanted to do a little bit extra than just making an articulated figure body, because, again, like when you've got a size of alien this size, and if it was just an articulated body, then the comparisons would obviously have been made between this one and one that we were getting from NECA. Instead, what they decide to do is something that you would almost have expected Hot Toys to do by putting a figure inside of an encased rubber suit. In fact, they did do that with a couple of their Alien figures. I have an Aliens Warrior, still on my DTOLF shelf. Luckily has not started to deteriorate, but I've heard a lot of horror stories from people that have had that figure where the skin has started to break apart. I feel like there might be some future for this alien of that same similar future where this guy's going to start to split and deteriorate over the years the longer that you have this guy. Of course, mileage will always vary depending on what climate you have a lot of these figures displayed in, how often you are moving the limbs, for example, or even in a case like this. I have the legs on a bend, like the top of the thighs are bent forward, and I have the elbows bent. Those are two places that if I leave this figure like this indefinitely, yeah, they're probably going to start to split in all of those areas. For the time that I've actually had this figure on display, or at least been playing around with the figure, it's only been a handful of hours. I haven't had, obviously, any issues with it right now, But long term is the thing that you always have to think about when you're picking up a higher end figure. Do you think that Mezco should have actually gone the route of a skin suit for the alien? Or do you think that they should have just done an articulated figure? And again, the irony in all that is if they had just, again, done an articulated body, all of us people that are looking at these figures online would simply have just made the simple comparison of between this one and a NECA. To which, if that was the case, I would say that this guy was not worth the price point of $100. By adding a skin suit, I would say it's warranting the additional price point of what these guys are going for, but it comes at a price of the collector who eventually is going to have this figure all splitting and breaking down on them. Have you had the chance to pick up the 112 Collective Alien Xenomorph? If you have, let me know down below in the comment section what you guys think of it, or just based on this review. Is this a figure that you guys do want to pick up? And are you a little worrisome also as well that Mezco went the route of using a skin rubber suit over top of an articulated body? Certainly weigh your thoughts in down below in the comment section what you guys think of the 112 Collective Big Chap. Also, if you guys are interested to pick this one up for yourself, I did find this one over on Entertainment Earth's website. Price was pretty good on this guy, and he shipped right away. So if you guys are, again, interested, I can provide the link down below in the video description. Also, as well, if you guys enjoyed this video, want to hit it with a like. If you love the content you guys are seeing and do certainly want to stick around for more, then make sure you hit the subscribe button down below and turn on the bell notification. Lots of stuff coming your way, guys. As always, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.